Hello, everyone. This is Sean Saunders, and we are ready for another fireside chat called Data Governance and Digital Identity, Enterprise Security and Cell Phone and Autonomous Digital Footprint.
I don't know if there's a confusion on our...
This is being led by Darren Kaplan, who is a podcaster and growth officer at The Standard. Thank you so much.
We have a special panel put together for you. I've got two great guests, and I'm looking to spend about the next 30 minutes with them. And I'm grateful that you're going to be spending your time with us as well. We think that time really is the true currency. So our guest today is Ioana from Accenture and Joe from Cloudflare. And we're going to weave a story today about data governance and empathy. And what I thought we'd do is just to warm up the audience and warm up our panel is really get a sense of really two things. One, how long have you been in the data security sector? I know that answer. And then why? What is that passion that you still have about the sector? So, Ioana, why don't we start with you? How long and what's your passion?
Well, Darren, how long? I'm starting to date myself. It's been 20, yikes, 3 years, 23 years next month. I had to count for a second. And I think what keeps me coming back is just the challenge. And it's funny, right? Because what do we talk about today? How to make stronger passwords. What were we talking about 23 years ago? How to make stronger passwords. But
my password's password.
Yeah, right. Password one, right? 21, I don't know. But, you know, everything changes all the time. If you look at the data proliferation, if you look at the device proliferation, if you look at, you know, what we can do on one of these today that we couldn't do 23 years ago, it never stops evolving. It never stops changing. And so it's like this puzzle and you're almost done. And then somebody comes and dumps a bunch more pieces on the table for you to figure out, you know, and it was hard to begin with. And now you're like, oh my God, what just happened? Right. So that's what keeps me coming.
No, I think that's great. And you know, that great analogy of a puzzle. There's a lot of people puzzling right now during shelter in place and COVID and looking for that, building the framework, right? You go from the outside in. So I absolutely love that. Joe, we've known each other, but why don't we just tell the audience, you know, you a little bit, how long you're in the sector and what is that passion that keeps you going every day?
Yeah, it's the, well, hi everybody. It's great to be here. My name is Joe Sullivan, and yeah, I've been thinking about information security, how to protect people's information and meet their expectations, I guess, since the 1990s, from one perspective or another. I'm fortunate that I've been able to sit in, you know, kind of being in the government side, looking at it, being in inside companies, looking at it, and also being a consumer and putting a lot of data out there in the world. So. I always try and think about it from the consumer's perspective, or the person who really owns the data. And are we meeting their expectations? And are we setting them up for success when they give us their data?
And I think that's what's going to make this panel really special. Is we got Ioana, who is at Accenture, and she deals with clients, media, high tech. Then you have Joe, who is at Cloudflare dealing with customers, users, and of course the executive team and board. So I like that we have this multi-dimensional conversation. And where I want to start is with empathy. You know, last year was a tough year. It's still going on. People are working from home. Some people enjoy that, some people don't. And I believe the people that are winning are the managers who manage with empathy. So I want to also just, again, dig in a little bit about the personalities here. So Ioana, you're at Accenture. You've probably, I would assume, lived on the plane or a plane or in a hotel for many years. What has it been like for you these last few months? And talk to me about the empathy and the management style on what you've tried to do to keep your team healthy. And then Joe, I'm going to hit you with the same question.
Yeah, so the reason I've actually picked to be in the tech space, in part because it's really interesting and I get to work with really cool companies, but in part because most of them live in Silicon Valley. I live in Silicon Valley, so it's actually kept me off the plane. What's changed, honestly, with work from home is most of my colleagues, you're right, are on planes Monday morning and Thursday afternoon, and that gave me some breathing room. right? We didn't schedule Monday morning or Thursday afternoon meetings because half the team wouldn't be there because they're flying. But now everybody's like, oh, look, we can have meetings on Monday morning and Thursday afternoon and every other day and hour of the week. So my calendar just, but, in terms of empathy, how have things changed for us since COVID? Interestingly, from a purely Accenture perspective, actually not a lot. We were already doing this, working remotely thing. It was pretty easy, so it was kind of business as usual. But speaking of empathy, I don't know if it's empathy or shock and awe, but, my colleagues, whether they're clients or fellow employees, who have kids, and especially little kids or special needs kids. I have colleagues, they work, their spouse works, and they have like first graders or kindergartners who are doing the remote school thing somehow, right? But it's not like the older kids where they know how to log into Zoom by themselves and they can go kind of be self-sufficient. You're now having to like log your kid in and make sure that the Zoom is working and then go off and do your own meetings and your own work. And I don't know how they do it, and I have so much admiration for how they figured it out, because I'm sitting there thinking, I don't know. I think I would just implode if I had to do the same thing. So kudos to everybody who's a parent and who's figured out how to maintain all of that with working and kids and everything else that's going on all in the same house. I know, I don't know if you can see, but here's my coworker right here, and he's decided, I've tried to push him off a couple of times, and he's like, nope, I'm going to be right here. So he's here, here I am, and we've all kind of adjusted to like how we do this.
Your Mondays and Thursdays, that's with some maybe sacred time. So even that scheduling, and these are big impacts. I didn't realize that you are not having to be on the plane as much. That's also just an absolute luxury. Joe, and for you, big year, for some accomplishments on the company, but talk to me about what you've learned, mindfulness, empathy, reflection, awareness. What did you take away 2020? What was your 2020 takeaway?
Yeah, I have a couple of takeaways. The first one was that we needed to show, as a business leader, with a large team and working at a decent sized company, we've needed to show empathy to our employees, not just because of COVID, but because of a lot of other things. The last year has been really emotionally draining for people. I think that you put people in shelter in place, which maybe means they're already, watching more screen time, seeing more, paying attention to the news more, and then you talk about the racial injustice issues that we went through as a country. So much during 2020, and then the election and what's happened in the Capitol in the last week. And the really important thing is that you have to step back and remember that not everyone is in the same shoes that you are in individually and processing things the same way you are. I've been an executive sponsor for our Black employee resource group at my current company and my prior company, and I think I learned more from that than I do from my day job, just because it gives me an opportunity to speak frequently with people who grew up differently than I did, had different perspectives, are treated differently, and I've developed more awareness of their perspectives and injustices. And so, you see how things play out with like the political division, and you still all have to come to work together, even though we come from all different backgrounds. And so it's been a really hard year for a lot of people. And then, that's the people side of it. And then you layer on the technology challenges that everyone has had. What we saw last March, Darren, you and I have talked about this on, I think, a different session in the past. All of a sudden, everybody was forced to go home at the same time. And like Ioana said, the kids were there. Suddenly the parents, everybody converged on the home at the same time. And everybody was like, I need to be on Zoom right now. And so they were like, wait a minute, we don't even have enough laptops for the whole family. And so then it was like the parents were taking their work laptop and letting the kid use it for school, which was probably a company policy violation, but you don't really want to enforce it against them. And then they were all going in the closet and getting out a different laptop, which hadn't had software updated in 2 years because it had been abandoned.
Thank you.
And then and then everybody's frustrated that the video conferencing stuff isn't like good enough. And so people start like going and researching and downloading other software that's not approved by the company. And so from a security standpoint, you're like, the security team's like, well, get everybody behind the VPN. And then the VPN wasn't built to handle all that traffic. You have everybody being remote at the same time. And then the IT team gets swamped. And then everybody's trying to work 8 hours sitting at a desk at home that doesn't have the right ergonomics, and then they get a neck ache, and then they need to go on disability. Like it started spiraling last March, and you layer, so you have the emotional side and the technical challenges that we were all dealing with in our different organizations, and then I hate to say it, but then what followed is kind of like the third thing was the bad guys, started to exploit it. Those of us working in security, we started seeing the COVID-related scam stuff very quickly. We started seeing malware targeting people knowing that they're working at home. So many different things like that. And then, over the course of the year, the attacks have evolved. We're seeing, like my company, we provide a bunch of different security services, but in one area we've been known for a long time is stopping denial of service attacks, which is basically a massive flood of traffic coming at your website. Well, what the bad guys started doing in the fall of 2020 was they knew that everybody's working from home, so everybody's enterprise systems are now more stressed than their website in many ways. Like the website stood up to the first round of COVID. The internet survived COVID part one, but part two, the bad guys started coming in. And they started doing denial of service attacks on the infrastructure side of companies and sending ransom notes. And so large financial institutions to small businesses started getting these like, we will knock all your employees off the internet if you don't pay us a ransom.
And there's a lot there. So
crazy.
Ioana.
There you go.
There are a lot of thought bubbles that Joe brought up. Zoom, family members using corporate computer, the work from home, physical stress, the threats, denial of service. You pick up one of those threads, pick one of them. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, wow. All I could think is there's a very large hole in the bucket, dear Liza. Joe's absolutely right. I think for me, the interesting thing, just to pile on to some of that is, we actually had clients who, they were very in person, and all of a sudden their people had to go home, and, there were no laptops, and they didn't have them at home. So, there was a run on Costco, Best Buy, Fry's, companies were literally sending their people and say, go to your local technology place, wherever you can buy a laptop, and buy a laptop, So then what do you do? Well, it's this completely unmanaged thing, right? Kind of almost as bad as the laptop that came out of the closet from 2 years ago, right? I think that, the kind of the bigger societal problem to me is, I have a lot of teacher friends. And teachers were basically sent home on Friday and expected to start teaching on Zoom on Monday, so, and they'd never used Zoom, and they'd never taught online before. And they have their kids who are stressed out and they don't know what's going on. And still the pressures of, do you have your, are you going to make your testing? Right. Are we doing testing? Are your kids keeping up? And then you have, those areas like around here where we have a very educated population, a very technically savvy population. It wasn't as big a deal. But then you have, other areas that are less technically savvy, less wealthy, where, you know, the parents don't know how to help the kids. Parents don't know what Zoom is. There isn't technology in the household, right?
And the language.
So
and
what do you
there's
do with
also the
that?
language background. You have
The hacking.
you have the parents that speak Spanish and the kids that speak Spanish
Sure.
and English, and everyone is trying to show what a password is and translate. Are you seeing that also with your customers, your clients?
Yep. Yeah. So, I mean, we had clients, you know, and back to the VPN issue, you know, our business, you know, good for us, but our business exploded when COVID came around. You know, we were getting calls multiple times a day from our clients saying, oh my God, I have to send all my people home and my VPN is 3, 4, 5 years old. And it was really built to support like 10%, not 100%. You know, what do you do with that, right? And so what we've started seeing is a lot of, you know, discussions around, well, let's start now taking some steps towards zero trust, right? It's not enough to just build a bigger VPN. And we had clients doing all kinds of crazy things. One of our clients actually started making their people work in shifts. And if you were deemed critical, you got to work from 8 to 5. And if you were deemed non-critical, you got to work from 5 till whenever. And the really interesting thing is that executives were considered critical, but their EAs were considered non-critical. So now, you know, as a VP or whatever, you don't have any support until 5 p.m. when your EA comes online, you know. So there are all kinds of interesting ways, or, you know, people saying, or companies saying, you're not allowed to use video. You can only use audio so that we have enough bandwidth for everybody. So, you know, there were a lot of business disruptions and a lot of clients who had a really hard time. And now it's like, okay, look, it's not enough to just make a bigger VPN. You know, now that you have your people working from home and all the things that Joe said about, you know, the dangers there. And yes, the bad guys are like, woohoo, you know, let's take advantage of this awful situation. Now is the time, you know, between moving to cloud to make things cheaper and potentially keeping people home permanently, which a lot of companies are looking to do. There are some advantages of that. But you can't just keep doing what you were doing, but somehow more or bigger, right? Now is the time to start talking about zero trust. You know, how do you, you know, build that so that, you know, your people working from home on a laptop that they bought from Best Buy that maybe might still not be managed, right? Because let's face it, some of them haven't gotten to that. How do you get to, you know, starting to use things like SASE, Secure Access Service Edge, right? How do you start building those steps towards zero trust so that, you know, it doesn't matter what the endpoint, it doesn't matter what the source connection, you are,
well, I think,
you know, your
I think you
stuff is
bring
gonna
up
be
an interesting dynamic here, because you have on your side, you're at Accenture, and these are the best practices that keep people safe. And then Joe, everyone looks to you at the company to keep the company safe. So what does your whiteboard session look like when you're with the executive team, right? Because I think we're having that right conversation. What is next?
Yeah, it's funny. You know, as a company, so my company, we actually have a SASE product, and you know, and we launched the next generation VPN at the beginning of last year. So time, you know, there's a reason why our company did well last year. It was because we had the right product for the situation, and we gave away our access product, which is kind of like the next generation VPN. We gave it away for 6 months, starting last March, just because of the situation. And we had a lot of businesses. Originally, we were just going to give it away to small businesses, and then large businesses wanted it as well. So we did. And so that, from a product standpoint, it went great. I ended up spending a lot of time talking to customers. And to Ioana's point, like, this is the time that everybody's moving to a more borderless world. So like, small and large 15 years ago ran all of their own stuff in their own data center. And it's slowly been getting pulled out, right? We've moved our email to the cloud. A lot of companies use Salesforce and applications like that are all in the cloud. And so it's kind of like every company was at some point in their digital transformation into public cloud and SaaS products and you know, all the other acronyms that go with that. but everybody was kind of halfway there.
Yeah.
And, you saw a lot of all of the cloud infrastructure and software products did really well in 2020 because every company bought more of them and did less of the on-premise stuff. Because you literally couldn't go into your office to reconfigure your network stuff anyway. So you had to move to the cloud. But I think that the implications are going to be felt for a while.
But it's interesting. You also said that not only both companies have a great year. One of the super cool things that Cloudflare did is they launched Cloudflare TV as a way to communicate to their customers and doing some employee engagement. So I want to talk about two things here. One, Joe, I want you to tell a little bit about Cloudflare TV. Then two, Ioana, I'd love for you to show or tell the rapid innovation that Accenture did in days or weeks instead of years, right? Because it seems like everybody was shipping pretty aggressively last year. So I'd love to see kind of what you shipped, but I also want Joe to talk about something they shipped that is a little bit off what we're talking about, but still about educating about governance and data. So Joe, why don't you go first, then we go to Ioana.
Sure. So the interesting thing was, of course, like every other company, we had a sales and marketing budget going into 2020, and we had, we wanted to develop awareness. And, when you sell a security product like we do, one of the things you do is you go to the security conferences, and all of a sudden the conferences went away. How do you connect with your existing and future customers? And so the real question was, like, should we switch to doing things like webinars and broadcasting, like sessions like this? Would anybody actually show up? And so we started doing them. I did a number of different targeted webinars, and they went really great. We had really interactive sessions with existing customers and potential customers. People were showing up for them. And even at a time during the summer when people were saying that we all have Zoom fatigue, people also have a desire to interact with other adults and talk about their work and to grow professionally and personally. And so we created something called Cloudflare TV last year, where we just started creating content. Our CEO told us, we want to have content 24 hours a day. In the beginning, it was like, how do we get our employees to just start talking about what they're working on, stuff they've worked on, invite outside guests. And we wanted to we set out with a goal of 24 hours a day of content. And we had a company of less than 1,000 employees. We somehow managed to pull it together. And we had sessions, there were definitely sessions where some employees were doing cooking shows. And we had a version of Hollywood Squares where all of the questions are around technology. I've been on that. Didn't get to be the middle square. Still bitter. But we got to, we just started generating content that way, and it was really well received, and we've just kept doing it. And I've encouraged members of my team who were afraid to go on camera have now done sessions and found their voice. Yep. And a lot of customers have been happy to go on. And then, we focused on current events and different things happening in technology. And
I love that hustle in a good way. What about Accenture? What did they ship? What was some of the big things that you shipped in record time for the organization?
Yeah, so I'll talk about kind of two different things. I think the thing that I am most impressed and proud of, although I personally had nothing to do with it, is, as I'm sure you both know, we have a very large managed service capability. We do IO, we do AO, we do managed security services. And we have over 100,000 people globally doing that. And most of them do that from a delivery center. And so I'll give an example of just, the managed services capability, which is part of my organization. We have 2,500 people who do managed services from a delivery center. And in 2.5 days, we got all those people packed up with their desktops, or we got them laptops. We moved them home. If they didn't have good enough internet, we got them better internet. We got them UPSs because a lot of them at home had, sketchy power capabilities, and we were back up and running from home, servicing our clients.
Amazing.
They didn't really even notice anything in 2.5 days, right? Yeah, it was. I was like, when I heard that's just like, wow, great job, team. The other thing, and Accenture, we have to be on the leading edge of things. We've been now for, I think, at least a year, 99% in the public cloud. And I think that last 1% is just stuff that's going end of life if it hasn't already. And it wasn't worth the effort, right? So we've done zero trust to the end. We have that already, right? So our clients started looking to us, well, how did you do that? How did you get everything in the cloud? And if Accenture with 514,000 employees globally can do it, so can anybody, right? So we started getting those requests from clients and they need it, now that a lot of them are having very kind of shaky revenue streams, they're really looking at, moving to cloud and modernizing as an imperative, because not only is it more secure, but it is saving them money.
Too. You move everything. When do you delete?
Mm-hmm.
When is it okay to delete? When is it, before you get the subpoena? I mean, we're seeing a lot of this, right? Is there a governance? Is there a playbook? What are you seeing when these decisions get made?
Yeah. So data governance is one of the things that we do a lot for clients. Obviously, in the financial services space, it's more meaningful and interesting because it's a highly regulated environment, but we have these problems with all of our industries. I was talking to a CISO, one of my fintech clients, who told me that, our data grows by about 30% a year, which is, oh my God, what do you do with that? Right. And we now have this thing, it's not a database anymore. It's a data lake. Right. And whoever came up with that term was genius. They didn't call it a data pool, which is kind of this thing with walls and it's clear and you can see to the bottom. They called it a lake, right? Which is kind of dark and murky and you don't know what's down there, right? Perfect terminology, right? That's, when our clients ask for help with data governance, it's a big deal. And I'll give you an example from a couple of years ago. One of my high-tech clients in the Valley, they, about a year before the GDPR, the big date, the May 25th date came up, they said, we want to be ready for this. We want to be able to have on our website, click here to, see your data and edit or delete it or whatever you want to do with it. And the challenge wasn't building that website with that functionality. Step one was, okay, give us a list of your applications. Well, we don't know. So let's go discover what applications they have. That was the first big thing. Let's figure out, let's enumerate the applications. And then the next big step was, okay, great. Now that we know what applications you have, what data are they using? Are they reading or writing? Where are they getting their data? Are they sending their data on to somewhere else? Right. And all that whole data flow. Right. And then, okay, well, who owns the data? Right. When you're talking in a financial services type context and the subpoenas that you're talking about, okay, great. Data holds, right? How long do you have to retain that data?
Yep.
How do you know that you have passed that point? And then how do you make sure you delete the data that you no longer need? And, how many of us have hundreds, thousands of emails in our inbox, right? That data cleanliness is not in our nature. Nobody's like, hey, I'm going to prioritize cleaning my data today.
I feel like you just watched what I did over the holiday break.
That's always the thing that gets pushed off.
That's what I did over the holiday break. Sorry, go on. But yeah, you just punch landed. You're right.
Well done. Congratulations. But it's hard. It's not interesting. It's not exciting. It doesn't make you money, right, as a company. But it's something that has to be done. And if your data is growing, and I'm sure that this one client isn't unique in their growth, right? If that's what's happening and your data is growing that much and you don't yet have governance because you don't quite know how to do it, you're sitting in the middle of this lake. You're not quite sure where the shore is, but you're trying to build a boat under yourself and you're trying to row to get to shore and shore is getting further away. What do you do?
It's
right?
Massive.
It's hard.
And Joe, pick that up on any part of that thought bubble. Like you pick that up wherever you want.
Two sides to it. One, I think absolutely the volume of data is growing tremendously inside a lot of organizations. And it's because of a desire to understand their customer better. right? And gather more data about them. There's been a lot of pressure in the advertising world to move from third-party advertising to first-party advertising, and there's different rules that apply. And especially in this world now where you're expected to get direct consent for the consumer, you kind of have to be in a direct relationship with them to collect their information now. And so more and more companies aren't relying on the Facebooks and Googles to collect the data and target the ads for you. They're trying to understand their own customers a lot better. And so you have a lot of these companies that don't have a sophisticated technology team starting to log a bunch of customer insights. Sometimes it's even done by the marketing team without talking to the technology team, and which then creates this real big headache. Like I think Ioana was talking about, of having to map out where all this sensitive data is. There's a whole new generation of startups like Borneo and Big ID and so on that their sole mission as a product is to help you map all your data.
Yeah.
Because what's happened over the last 10 years is the marketing teams and the technology teams are all gathering a bunch of customer data. They're putting it in a bunch of different databases to manipulate it in different ways. Some is in public cloud because they're like, oh, we can use the the search capabilities or the algorithm writing of these platforms. Some of it's in the old platforms. And then the engineer says, I want to marry the data between those two different platforms. So they create a third platform and they don't tell anyone. And so us as the security and privacy and compliance professionals, we come in and we're like, I think CIS top 20, number 1 is, and 2 is like, know where your assets are, basically. Like, here's what hardware do you have, what software do you have, and what data do you have? And I don't think most security professionals would sign on the line that says, I could say, yes, I know where all 3 of those, I know exactly what hardware, software, and data my company has. And that's scary.
No, I think you picked up that thread at a perfect spot. As we wind down, would like to ask one more reflective question. Knowing what you know now, this is for each of you. You both have a clear passion for the space. What advice would you give your 17 or 18-year-old self, right when you're getting ready to leave home for school, knowing what you know now, you're going back in time? Ioana, why don't you take that first? What advice?
Wow, I'm just glad that I'm old enough that the bulk of the internet didn't happen for me until I was old enough and already in the security space, so I knew what not to do. I think that, the advice that I would give myself is just to refine resiliency. I found that, our world is moving faster and faster every day. It's getting more complex all the time. And I think a core life skill for anybody anymore is just resiliency and learning how to solve poorly defined problems and learning how to cope with the speed of everything. And what I see around me, especially in a place like the Bay Area that tends to be, dense population, is people are having a really hard time coping. They're having a hard time adulting because it's too much, right? So developing those skills, the younger you are, just being resilient in that way is really important. You're not going to make it without that.
I think it's great. And I like the adulting. I think it's a good lesson for a lot of people, adulting. And Joe?
I like this question, Darren. I've thought about it a lot. I have 3 daughters who range from 18 to 13. So I spent the years bringing them to security conferences and things like DEF CON Kids, where they've got a chance to really understand the technology and risks in this area. But I think it's fundamentally for them, it's been 2 things. One is focusing on their own awareness of how they can control their information and their identity in this world. And so the basic one is they've had a password manager from day one. My kids, I hate that I pay $5 a month on my credit card for a password manager for my family, but I like that they actually they don't have one password for everything. They're controlling their identities online. And they're aware when they share information. That's the second part. And so they understand it. I do think that there's, I don't know what the right word is, but like there's generational differences in terms of like their comfort with sharing and being out on the internet. There's definitely less fear and more comfort in that younger generation than in mine, maybe because of the things I've seen. But those are the two things I want. I want them to have a sense of control and awareness.
No, I think I think those last 3 minutes are probably so meaningful for a lot of people in the audience who are just being thoughtful about their lives and in this interesting time of, again, self-isolation, seeing families. It's great lessons to share with family members. So Ioana and Joe, I thank you so much for being on this panel. These are great moments to share with each other. And when the self-isolation is beyond us, I look forward to grabbing a drink. I am part of the San Francisco to Miami exodus. So Joe, I'm waiting for you to come back to Miami. Ioana, we always got a place for you in Miami as well. And I just
don't put it past me.
All those companies are coming here. Yep. That's great.
The longest drive I ever did was moving from Miami to San Francisco. I don't know if I can
come back. I literally just updated my LinkedIn profile. I said I did the San Francisco to Miami exodus. It's the beach. So this is cool. And to Brad and Nest for putting together Banking 3.0. We appreciate you bringing everybody together. This is a meaningful day, and we look forward to the next speaker. So we are good. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Ioana. Be well.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.